Greetings, Taku Faithful. Thank you for joining me again this week. Once again, it's Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief, and I'm here to bring you all my review of the Arrow Season 4 finale right here on Otaku Assemble Weekly, and as always, to bring you the latest in this week's Arrow episode review. And this is my review of Season 4, Episode 23, entitled Schism. But before I go ahead and jump into this week's review, I want to go ahead and apologize for the tardiness with my Flash episode review. I ran into some technical difficulties with my DVR last night, and so unfortunately I was not able to go ahead and upload my review. But don't worry, because my review of the Flash Season 2 finale will be up tomorrow night, so keep an eye out for that. Now, jumping into this week's episode, the Arrow Season 4 finale. General thoughts on the finale. The finale pretty much played out the way I expected it to, especially once we got about a quarter into the episode. Like, I pretty much figured out how Oliver was going to beat Darhk and more or less what was going to transpire afterwards. So I'll say this. The finale did not exceed any expectations, but it didn't fall under expectations either. It was pretty much what I thought would occur. And I don't have too many problems with the episode, but there are a few things I do want to discuss, and I'll get into more detail with those throughout this review. So first and foremost, let's talk about the way Oliver did beat Darhk and the way in which it happened. Pretty much what we were alluded to a couple of episodes ago, where we discovered that Oliver had the ability to sort of withstand Darhk's abilities. He could sort of hold his own against Darhk's magic, give himself a bit of an immunity to it by pretty much utilizing hope, by utilizing that sort of internal light that Oliver has. Well, more or less that's what happens in the finale. It just happens on a much larger scale because, of course, Darhk's abilities have grown much larger after the nuclear strike 2 episodes ago, and so of course, Oliver, just that small internal hope that he has wouldn't have been enough. So he ends up utilizing the collective hope of the citizens of Star City. Okay, so here's the thing with that. I don't think that was necessarily a bad idea. My only real criticism about it is the fact that, as, for lack of a better term, as cheesy as that sort of sound, the problem is that doesn't really fall in line with the overall tone of the show. Now, we do know that this season, with Season 4, the writers and the executive producers, they did want to make the show a little bit more lighthearted. They wanted to sort of lighten up, especially after seeing how successfully The Flash did in its first season, having that sort of light tone and humor and whatnot. So we did, they did make an effort to go ahead and take that route with Season 4, with, with Oliver having a somewhat lighter costume, going by the Green Arrow moniker, and then, of course, Oliver's whole character arc in the season was trying to find a way in which he could serve as the Green Arrow but not kill anyone, and by doing so hopefully inspire hope into the people of Star City. I mean, that's the whole motivation behind Oliver running for mayor and deciding that he needed to be a public figure and he needed to, show his face during the daytime, and this, that, and the other. So all of this, right? So like I said, there's enough in the season already to where that sort of collective hope and that idea of having the city behind the Green Arrow, there was enough in the season already that got us to that point where it was somewhat of a payoff. But once again, like I said, that optimistic swing, that optimistic tone, this series hasn't really garnered the reputation of having that before. So it's a little jarring because it's a change, right? It's an immediate change. And it's one that happens in one season. So like I said, once again, not necessarily bad. I just don't think it necessarily meshes well with the overall tone of the show. So now here's the thing, though. Once again, it's the first season they've done something like that. So if we see more material like that as get the next upcoming seasons, okay, then it won't be as jarring. But as it stands, that's just something I've noticed. Now, here's an issue, though, and this I think is the biggest issue of the episode. This is the most important issue of the episode, and it is the fact that Oliver kills Darhk at the end. All right. Now the reason, and this will probably, hopefully this will be the bulk of my review, because the thing is, I'm actually mixed on that. And here's the reason why. Okay, so remember what I just previously said about what Oliver's character arc was supposed to be in this season, right? This was supposed to be Oliver's, opportunity for change in this season, right? This was supposed to be his sort of personal journey, his self-quest in this season. And for the most part, he did fall in line with that. There were a couple of instances where it seemed like he might not take that route. And we do know that after Laurel's death, Oliver was sort of hell-bent on, no, I have to kill Darhk. Which is another reason why, him killing Darhk in the end, it was a little bit unnerving, because the reason for that is because for a second it seemed like Oliver actually wouldn't take that course of action. Like, even up until this episode, he was still questioning whether or not he was going to do it. Like, he hadn't fully fortified himself, like, yes, no matter what, I have to take Darhk off the board, right? And then finally we found out what those flashbacks were tying into. And really, guys, like, those flashbacks really did not get summed up until Amanda Waller's monologue at the end of the final flashback scene. And like I said, it's one of the reasons why the flashbacks were just distractions. In my personal opinion, the flashbacks are just distractions. They're just filler so that we can go ahead and fill out, 48-minute episodes, because if they all just sort of concluded into what Amanda Waller's monologue was about how Oliver has this natural schism. He has these two sides of himself. He has this duality, and the idea that Oliver's whole mission on the island this season was not to suppress his darkness. No, it wasn't that at all. It was pretty much just doing what was necessary in order to get the job done. So when you take that and then you correlate it with what Oliver says to Damien when he kills him, this idea that, with Slade, I actually had a choice. With you, I don't. So Oliver is looking at, he's sort of taking the approach of, this is a necessary kill. The idea is that, oh, I'm not killing a man necessarily, more so than I'm killing a mad dog. Or I'm not killing a man necessarily, more so that I'm killing a force of nature. So the idea that Damien's death was a necessity. Okay, that I agree with to some degree, but I think that the way that they've gotten us to that point, that I don't think was executed as well as it could have been. And once again, going back to those flashbacks, if that was the whole point of getting Oliver to that point where he could, sort of see situations in that light, that sometimes you have to do this as a necessity. Now, the good thing about that is, it does sort of play into how Oliver was at the start of the series. Because remember, that is the whole point of these flashbacks, or at least it should be the whole point of these flashbacks, is that it's giving us the background information to understand how Oliver became who he was at the start of the pilot, right? But once again, the problem and the fault with the flashbacks is that it takes too long to get there. If that was the case, we could have gotten there much, much sooner. If anything, I think it would have really contributed to the series more if we got the end of the flashbacks right after Laurel's death. And that now that we got the flashbacks, and then you compound that with Laurel's death, then Oliver sort of making that affirmation that, yes, no matter what, I have to take out Darhk. Now it makes a little bit more sense, because now that Oliver has gone ahead and he's taken that course of action at the end of the season, it does sort of contradict everything that Oliver's been working towards this entire season. It sort of does. I want to know what you guys think. Please feel free in the comments below, present a counter argument, because as it stands right now, I can't think of one. I cannot. If Oliver's entire character arc and his opportunity for change was supposed to be him learning to be able to be the Green Arrow without killing people, and then he goes ahead and kills Darhk anyway, does that or does that not contradict his character arc for the season? That is the question I am posting to you in the comments right now. Please feel free, present me with a counter argument. So like I said, I'm mixed on it, because on the one hand, I agree with it. But on the other hand, I think it was a questionable turn of events. I think it was a questionable change that the writers made that, I have to question what was the point of doing it. What was the point of everything they did in the season if it was just going to get us back to that point? Now, I will say this, and I will give them this credit. If in fact we are talking about Damien's death was a necessity, then the good thing is we aren't coming from a place of revenge, which that is suggested when in that final exchange when Oliver says he had a choice with Slade Wilson, but he doesn't have a choice with Darhk, that it's not coming from a personal place and it's not coming from a place of vengeance. That I think is actually the good thing of it. But once again, the idea that, you have to tap into this darkness in order to exact justice, that opens up a can of worms I feel needs to be addressed. It really does. Now, the final thing I'm going to go ahead and discuss in this review is pretty much the aftermath. Where does the series stand by the end of the episode? So Oliver becomes mayor. All right, and now that I like that idea because some of my favorite Green Arrow stories from the comics was that point when Oliver was mayor in the comics. I did kind of get a kick of that because we got to see more Oliver Queen than we did Green Arrow, which is why I appreciate those story arcs in the comics. And I did sort of chuckle at the idea that it seems like Team Arrow has separated, and then of course this is the moment in time when Oliver would become mayor, because the same thing happened in the comics. Was Oliver, Black Canary, and Speedy they had all gone their separate ways. Oliver and Dinah had broken up. Roy decided to go off on his own and become I believe he was Arsenal. I don't think he was Red Arrow at that point in time in the comics. I think he became Arsenal, but he pretty much he pulled a Dick Grayson. He pulled a Nightwing. He became his own man, and Oliver ended up becoming mayor of Star City. So I like that. I like that those two things did correlate. And once again, it is a bit of a payoff for me, because while we didn't get Mayor Oliver in this season like I had always hoped, we could potentially get it in season 5, assuming that Oliver doesn't lose that election that's supposed to take place in August. But I will say this though, I find it questionable that Team Arrow separated. And the reason for that being is because there was nothing that, there was no internal conflict that caused it. And there was nothing that any one member did to create that separation, or that schism, if you will. It's not like at the end of season 3 when Oliver betrayed Diggle, and that's what sort of separated him and Diggle. And it wasn't even the same thing of what we got. What was it at the end of season 2 when Thea found out that Oliver knew that Malcolm Merlyn was her father, and so she had a reason to separate herself from Oliver. It wasn't anything like that. So it was kind of like Thea, sort of got wrapped up in guilt for more or less holding an arrow to Damien Darhk's daughter's throat. And she was like, the fact that I would even go to that extreme, she's sort of questioning herself. She doesn't trust herself. So her idea is that she needs to separate herself from the team, right? But I don't necessarily think that's a good idea though, because Oliver's been one of the main characters, or she credited Laurel with it, but I actually think it was Oliver who has been the main character, sort of keeping her on the straight and narrow. So much so that he even fought Malcolm Merlyn over her. So the fact that she would separate herself from Oliver, I don't think that was a good idea. And same thing with John. John's suffering with the guilt over killing Andy, and so he feels he can't be part of the team. And then by the end of the episode, we saw apparently John's re-enlisting. So I don't know. It sort of felt like contrived reasons to just separate the characters over the seasonal break. And I'm assuming that by the season 5 premiere, all of them, the team will come back together and it'll be Team Arrow again, rah, rah, rah. But if that's the case, then I have to question why you even bothered separating them in the first place, especially since you could have really set up for some interesting character stuff now that Oliver's mayor. Like if Thea and John had stayed around, like how would the personal relationship sort of change now that Oliver's in that position of power? Questions. But all in all, like I said, the finale was what I expected. I don't think it was bad. Okay, I will say this though. I will say this. The only problem I had, the only legitimate issue I had with the finale was the fact that there was no setup for season 5. There was no setup for season 5 other than Oliver becoming mayor. Like we get no foreshadowing or no tie-in or no tease to what we could be dealing with in season 5. And if nothing else, if you really go back and rewatch this episode, especially that final scene with Oliver and Felicity, this felt like a series finale, which I'm curious as to whether or not that was in question at the time in which this episode was filmed. Like maybe the writers and producers didn't know if they would get renewed for a 5th season, because it feels like the end of the show. So right now it's pretty much an open book as far as to what we could get for season 5, because we have no lead-in, we have no headway into season 5 at all. So that's going to go ahead and do it for my Arrow Season 4 finale review. I want to thank you all for joining me again this week. In the comments below, leave your thoughts on the finale, on any of the topics I brought up in this review, and let me know the door's wide open for season 5. So what are some of your guys' speculations on what we could potentially see for next season? If you like this review, please feel free. Thumb it up, share it with other fans of the show and people you think would get a kick out of this review. And if you have yet to do so, subscribe to the OAW YouTube channel. Annotation is above head. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of this review, keep an eye out. Tomorrow night, The Flash Season 2 finale review will be up. Currently, I am working on getting a panel together for a final discussion on pretty much the Arrowverse, an Arrowverse discussion for this past year. Now that all of the shows have concluded, so I'm currently working on getting a panel together for that. And guys, also keep an eye out. I will be having a new discussion of the week, top 5, and Hunter x Hunter episode review later this week. So with that being said, this has been Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief. I'm signing off, and until next time, peace.